It might be a really bad show, but my channel has been Green Party themed the past few days, and I think it's really funny that Jill Stein is now on Piers Morgan and also with Destiny at the same time. So that's something I'm just really curious about in general. So we're going to fire that up real quick. All right.
Dick Cheney, the most dangerous vice president in the history of the United States, says, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. She issued a statement saying, I'm proud to receive Dick Cheney's endorsement.
A vote is a vote. Just because somebody endorses you doesn't mean that you have to
You literally take an endorsement from Adolf
we...
Hitler to win power? Jill, if you got an endorsement from Dick Cheney or Vladimir Putin, a public...
Well, she's going to say no because she's morally perfect. But honestly, if you're in a position right now where the Republican Party has fallen apart to the point where you have Dick Cheney crawling on his knees to give you an endorsement, yeah, that's a position of power, if anything. Dick Cheney's not coming out to endorse the pro-trans, pro-union party just for funsies.
Public endorsement, what would your reaction be? The Justice Department is alleging that some of the biggest stars in right-wing social media were unwittingly, they say, part of a sinister Russian operation to influence the 24 US elections.
Is she that one girl that got famous because she said really racist things on Twitter? Is this that girl? Because I saw her clip, I feel like, and I said that everyone's going to make her famous because she just said like really outrageous things, and right-wing media picked up on it like immediately.
I'm not a fan of Russia having any involvement in our politics. I don't believe that many of these commentators necessarily knew exactly where the money was coming from.
There's so few money in right-wing media because it's hard to tell the truth because you get censored and taken
Oh, it's a different girl? Okay.
off everything, so maybe that's why they were so thirsty.
$500,000 a month for a show that's barely doing any views from a political organization. Sure, why not? That's wild to me.
The Harris honeymoon is over, and if you don't believe me, ask the New York Times. This latest poll puts former President Trump a point ahead of his rival for the first time since the great replacement of Joe Biden. And that's despite 50 straight days of a Soviet-style program to rebuild the vice president as a visionary cultural phenomenon and a beacon of joy. Now, there are many possible reasons for this, but one of them may simply be that ordinary Americans are getting fed up with being told the sky is green and the grass is blue. Dick Cheney is a case in point. For the past 2 decades, he's been the bête noire of American progressives, who brand him a racist, warmongering supervillain who only became vice president because the Supreme Court, ironically, stole the 2000 election. But now he's endorsing Harris, and her campaign wants you to know it's because he's saving democracy.
What we do believe in is that the United States should retain its democratic foundations. And it's not just Cheney. I think there is a significant number of Republicans that say, well, you know, I may not agree with the vice president on this issue or that issue, but I cannot support somebody who's a pathological liar, somebody who fomented a insurrection to overthrow the election return. So I applaud the Cheneys for their courage in defending democracy. Obviously, on all the issues, we have very different points.
This entire issue is similar to a superhero movie where you have the villains and the heroes fighting, and then the greater villain comes, obviously, who wants to actually destroy the entire universe, and then you come together to defeat that greater evil, and then you continue the battles that you were having before that. It's okay to come together with someone even as bad as Dick Cheney because he's crawling on his knees to the party that is pro, you know, their slur DEI that they use, but that's pro-racial justice, that's pro-LGBTQ, that's very radically, compared to conservatives, pro-trans, very radically pro-union compared to conservatives. Dick Cheney is in a point of weakness, and he's coming to the Democrats to say Donald Trump really is this bad. And as I said in my other video, we don't want to make the same mistakes that movements did in the past, where the far left keeps on saying that Democrats and Republicans are the same, and they allow an actual like Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin type to get power. Trump's like, oh my, the stuff on X today was straight out of like, if you copy and pasted modern day Hitler, this is what you would get essentially.
View.
Well, Trump derangement syndrome is now so pervasive that Bernie Sanders, who's slightly to the left of Karl Marx, is now on network television.
To the left of Karl Marx is wild. But Donald Trump being a fascist, saying that there's going to be a mass deportation with concentration camps, and it's going to be a bloody operation with our military tearing apart communities, saying that immigrants are are poisoning the blood of America, saying we should be jailing anyone who said the 2020 election was fair because they stole the election. We should put them in jail for long periods of time, so they can really suffer the consequences. Talking about Putin and other dictators being the toughest, the most impressive people in the world. Trump obviously wants to maintain that type of authoritarian power. And yeah, that's why Bernie Sanders is saying that Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala is okay.
Praising Dick Cheney. The Harris doublethink doesn't stop there. Her campaign says she's simultaneously the front runner with all the momentum, but also the clear underdog in tomorrow night's debate, just as she is campaigning as a, quote, new way forward, as well as the current and serving vice president. Just as her values haven't changed, but every single one of her policies seems to, including this proud campaigner celebrating Trump's border wall, which she repeatedly condemned as a medieval vanity project. Now, some regular commentators on this show have accused me of...
Yeah, I don't know, Cloud. Maybe like all of the Avengers teaming up against Thanos, because Thanos wanted to, I guess... I did not watch the movie, but it's my understanding that Thanos was the ultimate villain that wanted to destroy the universe or something.
Being pro-Trump. I was often say in response, it's not my job to pick a side or my job to vote. I'm not an American citizen. So I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but it is my job to call out obvious hypocrisy and manipulation where I see it. And love him or loathe him, and there are, of course, many tens of millions in both camps in America, Trump is, well, Trump. We kind of know what he's like by now. Kamala Harris, though, remains a pretty unknown quantity. And tomorrow night we'll find out if the American people are buying into her. Well, joining me to debate is the streamer Destiny, Javier DeRusso from PragerU, host of Emily Saves America, Emily Wilson. I'd like to welcome Jill Stein, who's campaigning for the third time as the Green Party's candidate for president. Well, welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Destiny, if I can. The honeymoon was on fire for Kamala Harris. The coronation happened. The DNC convention happened. It was all going swimmingly. And you would have expected the polls to reflect this glorious few weeks of the anointment of Kamala Harris as the joyous, brave new way forward to save America. And yet the latest New York Times poll of likely voters nationally has Trump ahead of Kamala Harris. How can that be?
I mean, we've still got a lot of work to do. And I mean, the polls are all over the place. This is a historic environment for a political election. Who knows where the polls are going to be a week or two from now. Everything is still changing. Yeah.
I do love how everyone's hyper fixating on the polls that are slightly good for Trump, and at the same time ignoring all of the polls that are overwhelmingly good for Harris. But I like that. I want Democrats to think that we are down half a point. Because that'll get the base more motivated. So that's a good thing.
How important do you think tomorrow night's debate could be? I mean, the last debate ended the political career of Joe Biden. It precipitated the events that led to him quitting the race. Could this determine tomorrow night 90 minutes of Trump v. Harris live in front of the American people and the watching world? Could it trigger effectively the end of this race?
I feel like debates aren't really important until they are. Historically, debates haven't seemed to move the needle too much when it comes to favorability or desire to vote for a particular candidate. But I mean, obviously, in the last debate, because people had a perception about Joe Biden that seemed to be true, after watching the debate, that shifted the needle significantly. So, I mean, it's hard to say. It could be that tomorrow both of them do their thing. You know, Kamala gives her sassy pushback. Trump gives his normal, meandering, stupid, brainless answers, and nobody really cares much about what happens because everything goes as expected. So, or it could be that one of them has a huge, step out moment, that one of them loses their cool, and maybe that moves the needle a lot. It's really hard to say. I think making predictions in this election at this point is pretty much impossible.
Well, on that, I can...
Does anyone in chat think that America knows how bad Donald Trump is? So when you see Donald Trump go on these really long rants and he jumps from 85 topics to another 500 topics and he just calls Democrats stupid and communist, do Americans know Trump sounds that bad? Because if you look at the legacy news, the advertisements they are seeing from campaigns are all about inflation and about immigrants storming Pennsylvania communities. And I don't think they really know how Donald Trump himself sounds. So there might be another reveal here, just like there was for Biden, on the true state of Donald Trump's brain and how insane he has gotten. And I've held for a long time the position that Donald Trump getting banned from Twitter and Facebook and Instagram after January 6th saved him. That actually saved him because it allowed him to be out of the public spotlight, which is something he was never going to do himself.
Completely agree with you. Javier, you reposted on X. Day one of the Black Voters for Trump tour was a massive success. The next time the left tells you MAGA is nothing more than a bunch of old white guys, show them this picture, the next generation of black America will destroy the Democrat Party. And you said about Kamala Harris in August, a woman who's confident in what she stands for would be able to not only handle but address and overcome the criticism. Kamala Harris doesn't have that same resilience. Not even the left will respect her after about a year, once the honeymoon of electing a black woman wears off. I mean, strong words there, but what is interesting to me is how Trump's support amongst black Americans has been consistently increasing in the last year. And you've seen it being eroded from the Democrats, which is almost unprecedented, really.
This is only among men, by the way. The erosion of the black vote is only among men. Black women are really not changing their votes. They are more optimistic about Harris, but it is black men. So, you know, lumping together the entire black community doesn't make sense at all.
Modern times. Why do you think that is happening?
Well, it's largely happening because we're tired of being lied to. I mean, for how much longer can we have the Democrats telling us over and over that they are going to do all these great promises for us just to not follow through with anything? I mean, just look at the way back in 2020, Joe Biden went and acted like he was going to be the biggest spokesperson for BLM. Then the second he got into office, he had nothing to do with the black community anymore. We have seen these lies play out time and time again, and it's exhausting. We see the way that our economy is in shambles. We see the way that our border is wide open. We see all these pressing issues that are not being addressed properly by the Democratic Party. And at this point, it's like, what do black men have to lose? Why would we continue to go the same way that is clearly not working for us? Why don't we try something different and get away from the Democratic Party? And that's why more eyes are beginning to open up, because for far too long, we were told we weren't even allowed to consider conservative views or conservative policies. We were called coons and Uncle Toms and all these different slurs. And why is that? Because they wanted to take away our power. They wanted to take away our power to think for ourselves and to go out and seek the truth. And that's why so many more black men are starting to go for Donald Trump, because we ultimately want a better future for ourselves and for our next generations.
I mean, Jill Stein, it's been the presidential race this year where absolutely nothing could be predicted. It's been a roller coaster ride, the like of which we've...
Well, yeah, I should clarify that the numbers in general are not showing a huge shift of Trump support from black Americans. But if there is a shift in support, it's from men, and it's also very minor. And to be honest, many of these polls are counting voters who probably are not going to go out and vote, because the person responding to those polls in a pro-Trump way usually are not very serious about actually getting out and voting.
Never seen. This debate could be a coaster ride, the like of which we've never seen. This debate could be enormously transformative in the way the last one was. What do you think Kamala Harris needs to do to try and defeat Donald Trump tomorrow?
I think it's highly unlikely that this debate is going to capture the spirit of the American people. You know, I think we're seeing the two parties basically fail. Well, I think we are seeing the two parties fail to address the healthcare crisis,
It is kind of funny that they would ask Jill Stein this question. And I saw a comment say that it's disrespectful. I don't really think it's disrespectful, but it is kind of wild to be like, hey, what does Kamala need to do to beat Trump?
I think we are seeing the two parties fail to address the healthcare crisis, to address the housing crisis, where 50% of all Americans are basically 1 or 2 paychecks away from eviction, can't afford their rent. 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. You know, and yet we are spending half of our congressional budget on the endless war machine. And by the way, the vast majority of Americans want an end to the genocide going on in Gaza, and yet, you know, as well as a weapons embargo to make that happen. Yet we are not not seeing the two major candidates actually address either of these crises, and there's basically an unwritten agreement that we will not address the basically the dominance of Wall Street and the war machine over our economy, over our lives. The voters have basically been thrown under the bus. So it's no wonder that both candidates, I think, what you see largely are people voting against the candidate that they hate the most instead.
It's not about hate. And Jill Stein minimizing this, aside from the topic of my last video, minimizing the threat of Trump is inherently, in my opinion, as a progressive, a pro-Trump message. Minimizing the threat as simply not liking Trump sounds pro-Trump, and it is pro-Trump if you care about progressive causes. You can do a game where you go down Jill Stein's Twitter feed or her Instagram. The only time she will criticize Trump is if she's lumping in Kamala and Donald together. So they are both with corporations. They are both anti-democratic. But then she'll go off and call Kamala genocidal, but she'll ignore everything Trump ever did as far as genocides are concerned, as far as conflicts, the environment, healthcare, any issue. It would be, if you can find me a Jill Stein post criticizing only Donald Trump aggressively, I would be shocked.
What you see largely are people voting against the candidate that they hate the most instead of for the candidate that they want. And I'll just say that my campaign will be doing an after commentary, also addressing the same issues brought up in the election, but from a very different point of view.
Aw, she's going to be doing the same thing I'm doing.
That actually addresses the crises that Americans are facing in every dimension of our lives.
If, though, the majority of Americans shared your view, why would the Green Party not be doing a lot better in the polling?
Well, for one thing, we're not covered.
Yeah, and why has Green Party support went down over the past 12 years of organizing? Why has the Green Party gained no seats in any relevant districts or city councils? Why has the Green Party done almost nothing? And with independent media, the excuse that you're not being let on major media networks over a 12-year span does not hold up. Organizing can work without the big mainstream media platforms. There are many ways to organize. RFK came out of nowhere with no political party and just a bunch of conspiracy theories and was at 20% in the polls at some point. I know he has the last name. I know he had like the Joe Rogan podcast and all that. But Jill Stein's numbers are abysmal right now.
By mainstream
like even compared to where third parties usually do.
Well, for one thing, we're not covered by mainstream media, with the exception of, a few minutes here today, and thank you so much for that.
Of course.
But we are systematically suppressed. And let me just say that the Democrats have pulled out all the stops in order to throw us off the ballot. They have their army of lawyers in order to not just deny third parties, but to deny voters what voters have actually been vehemently clamoring for. At record numbers, 63% of Americans are now saying they need other choices, and in this election, so the American voters really want other choices here. Those are being denied. The Democrats have also publicly advertised for infiltrators and spies in order to disrupt our ballot drives, and this is their strategy. They do not want to face us.
Okay, does anyone believe that the Democratic Party, all right, do you believe that the Democratic Party put out public job requests for infiltrators to go into the Green Party? Did the Democratic Party, this big corrupt party, according to Jill Stein, did they do public ads on Craigslist to do this operation?
In the court of public opinion, keep us out of debates, keep us out of press coverage, fear campaign and smear campaign against us so that they can simply eliminate their competition. They are quaking in their boots. They have also hijacked our public funding, which we qualified for in order to prevent us from getting on the ballot. However, we are largely prevailing in spite of their army of lawyers and the rest. And we will be on the ballot for about 95% of voters. We will be the only anti-genocide, anti-war, climate emergency, pro-worker campaign that is on the ballot across the country with a potential pathway as far as you want to go. And this is what voters are clamoring for, and this is what the debate should actually be about.
How do you feel about Kamala Harris's U-turn on fracking?
Well, she's done a lot of U-turns. I mean, this is to be expected. You know, she puts her fingers to the wind and basically, you know, she's done a U-turn on immigration. You know, she's pulling back on the tax, the increase in the cap.
A little bit of a hot take here. I don't think Kamala's position on fracking even changed. When all the progressives were talking about banning fracking in 2020, I don't think any of them literally meant they would ban fracking and cut, you know, oil production to zero on day one. All of them had plans to ease off of fossil fuels over a certain period of time. And that didn't really change because obviously you cannot just cut off fossil fuels instantly. Everyone's energy prices would actually quadruple, maybe even more. That was never a thing that was going to happen. So Kamala's position now, with what the Biden admin did pass concerning the climate, is actually pretty consistent, but she needs to say it in a different way, because if she talks about wanting to ban fracking eventually, then voters are going to freak out about it.
Capital gains tax, which which Biden had promised, and this is typical of the Democrats. They went into the last election saying they were going to fight for a $15 minimum wage. They wouldn't even bring that to a vote, that they would stand for workers, yet they basically forced the railroad workers to accept a contract that they had already rejected, which created very dangerous working conditions, which laid the groundwork for the catastrophe in East Palestine. They long ago, Barack Obama was talking about the public option as an alternative so that people could actually afford their health care instead of this crisis that we continue to have to this day. Yet where was it? The public option disappeared. The supposed bulk purchasing for pharmaceuticals that would...
Do you know why it disappeared? Can you take a guess on why those conversations are not happening? Can you think about how politics works and how policy discussions are born? Think about where the most left movement came from. The most left movement in the past 40 years in America, 50 years, whatever, came after a Democratic presidency. With Donald Trump in the picture, and I've said this many times, Donald Trump is the main topic of focus. Donald Trump is going to be the main distraction. If Donald Trump's in the picture, we are not going to have any policy discussions because we are going to be fighting to make sure there are not militias going into communities of color, ripping people out of their homes, claiming that they are not really citizens, making sure that we do not have militias and our military going into communities to make sure that women are not having abortions or that trans people are not receiving health care. We are going to be fighting over if we have a democracy or not. We're going to be fighting over if Trump's political opponents are put in jail. That will be the topic for the next 4 years if Donald Trump wins. All of these progressive policy things that Jill Stein's talking about will go on the far, far, far back burner if Donald Trump wins. If Kamala wins, instead, then we can start having these policy discussions again, and they might actually be fruitful based on actual history. But this accelerationist wants Donald Trump to win.
Would bring down that price. Well, that became 10 pharmaceuticals by 2026, where the price would be reduced. So, what we hear from the Democrats basically is a lot of lip service. From the Republicans, we really don't hear much at all. They don't even make promises. But Democrats make promises and then break them, which is basically, driving people into the arms of Donald Trump. The most spoiled elections that the Democrats ever had was 2010, following the Wall Street bailouts. While millions of homeowners got thrown out, there was the Democratic trifecta, basically bailing out Wall Street and throwing working people under the bus. That is why people are moving to the right. That is why people are so hungry for other options. As you were saying in your previous segment, what we must have is a debate. If we can't actually have a debate in our elections, when are we going to have a real debate? And you don't get that from two parties that are bought and paid for by the same...
Yeah, that's true as well. Jill Stein is also against funding Ukraine. And not only internally in America, but Putin really wants Donald Trump to win because Donald Trump will stop supporting Ukraine, and that will increase chances of a world war, or whatever you want to call it. You don't need to use that kind of verbiage or that description of like a world war, but essentially what that would cause is a ripple effect through the entire world with our relations, foreign policy, yada, yada. But yeah, Jill Stein and Putin will be dining together, of course.
Very powerful economic interests by the war machine, by Wall Street, by AIPAC, etc.
I don't disagree with you. Emily Wilson, Just want to talk about something. You posted on video on X saying morally superior liberals.
Well, even in the UK, they're having a lot of issues with racial tension because of far-right populists stroking division. So it's happening in other countries as well. What happens in America and what happens in other countries is going to have that ripple effect for authoritarianism and anti-democratic governments rising. That's why we are fighting fascism right now. Okay, we are at a turning point where we need to squash fascism now, or bad things are going to happen outside of our government. Yeah.
Just want to talk about something. You posted on video on X saying morally superior liberals are like, I would never vote for a felon, Trump, but here's our statue of George Floyd. Another video you said about women. I'm sorry, I'm so tired of the tens of thousands online saying, I'm going to vote for her, Kamala Harris, because he's going to strip away all our rights. What rights? He was already president. What rights did you lose? Zero. He's trying to protect women's rights. Now, there'll be lots of women on the left who will say he's trying to destroy women's rights, and that the whole abandonment of Roe versus Wade after he packed the Supreme Court with conservative judges was specifically designed to remove women's rights. What do you say to that?
Oh boy. Yeah, no, those two videos I got a lot of feedback on. No, when I specifically ask what rights were taken away under Trump, I mean, they can't say. I don't think any of those women's rights were taken away under Trump. And now that he's not, agreed to not do the nationwide abortion ban, and now that he's moving forward with wanting to protect IVF, it's just one of those things they continue to say because, frankly, they have nothing else to say. And then, obviously, these are the same women that are single voter issues. They only care about aborting children. And then when it...
What are they? They're single what? What did you just say?
That are single voter issues. They
single voter issues. How dare you? Single voter issues.
Care about aborting children. And then when it comes to protecting women by keeping men out of sports, out of our spaces, and dangerous men out of our country, they're completely silent on. So they don't actually care about women's rights or protecting them.
Oh, I would pay to see the pitch, not only from like Russia, but from, right-wing companies going into failed acting majors. So like if you're in an acting school or performance arts, like everyone in the Daily Wire, I want to see the script they give all these acting majors to turn them into pundits, because she seems bored reciting these topics. And she's making me kind of bored.
Once again, they don't know what a woman is, so it wouldn't matter either way. And yeah, I just think it's funny that the morally superior liberals are so quick to be like, Trump's a felon, he's a bad guy, and all these things. Yeah, and they're like, no, felons should be able to vote and do all these things. They're like, unless it's Donald Trump. But George Floyd was apparently an amazing person, so.
Well,
I mean, I agree we should focus on more so what the felony was for, or what all the felony convictions were for. That probably matters more. I think just saying he's a felon over and over again are not, that's not nearly as effective as an attack as going through everything. But it's hard to fit all of that into campaign ads, of course.
Unless it's Donald Trump, but George Floyd was apparently an amazing person, so.
Well, George Floyd was brutally murdered by a police officer who was convicted of brutally murdering him. And unfortunately, we saw it all on a cell phone. Otherwise, it would have probably never been reported. I can see you shaking your head there, Destiny. Do you want to say
this
something?
happens.
Has anyone seen X today? And have you had the thought come to mind that this is the most like 4chan Nazi X has been? I know it's been getting bad, but today was like a boiling over point with the Haitian story. Or the fake story, and how openly like Ted Cruz and JD Vance and how quickly they picked it up. Like on X today, it actually made me consider deleting my account and never going on there again. And I've been considering that for a while. But
I can see you shaking your head there, Destiny.
This happens all the time. Whenever you debate conservatives, I mean, it's happened here. I've seen it happen in other places. It'll be like, here's the standards for, Republican lawmakers. And then they'll point to like people on Twitter on the other side. Like, well, what about that person? Well, I don't remember voting for George Floyd for president or nominating him for president. The idea that that's your basis of comparison, like, oh, you've got a problem with Donald Trump. Well, what about George Floyd? It's just such a hilariously telling, I think, example.
Well, let me ask you a difficult question.
Well, he was also a criminal that overdosed, but that's another situation.
That still doesn't get him any closer to being nominated for president of the Democratic Party. I don't understand what the comparison is for.
It's just funny to have different standards. You're like, this is fine, but this isn't fine. That's the whole point of that. You don't need to read that deeply into it. It's not that big of a deal.
It's funny to have different standards.
Oh yeah, high-fiving the doctor after an abortion. The same topic of, they have an abortion ban outside of the or not a ban. They have an abortion van outside of the DNC, and they're performing live abortions, and they're actually, you know, making sure that men cannot have children either by, you know.
And that's the whole point of that. You don't need to read that deeply into it. It's not that big of a deal.
They just have vans outside the DNC. They're just snipping you right there. They're snipping you. Vasectomy on the spot. You know, they're doing abortions on the spot. You just walk in. Hey, I'm pregnant. Take it out, and they do it. And yeah, and then you don't want to hear what they do with them next.
It's funny to have different. Do you have different standards for different people? Isn't that the point, to have different standards for different people? Like.
Yeah.
The point is,
I know, once again, that's a joke. It goes far over
George Floyd. They
heads.
put him on murals. They have tattoos. People have tattoos of George Floyd. They uplift him as this amazing, heroic individual. And the point that she's making is less about George Floyd being president. It's the way that they degrade Donald Trump. Because yes, it is not a glorious thing that we have a presidential candidate who has felonies on his hands, but what is more her point that she's making here is that they are degrading him, making it seem like he's this awful person, like he is the worst person to ever walk this earth. But then George Floyd, who has this terrible rap sheet, he is uplifted to the heavens by the left. So it's not about him being president.
Well, let's not.
It's just so stupid. I'm sorry. I love my mom to death. She's one of the best people in the world. She would make a horrible president. Okay, if my mom was auditioning to be my mom, I would be #1 her supporter. If my mom was auditioning for president, I'd be her biggest hater on the internet. Like, obviously, you have different standards for different people. This is such an insane point. Why would you even try to defend this? At least let her dance away gracefully.
And also, the entire point is the left
right?
has different standards for everything except for Donald Trump. That's the whole point. Anything he does is horrible, but if anyone other.
Yeah, meanwhile, if Donald Trump does not do a coup, we're like applauding. If Donald Trump gets a full sentence out, we're like, oh, good job, buddy. Like it's a 5-year-old. Like, wow, he really said a full sentence this time. This is so pretty. Wow, good words, Donald. You really spoke. You spoke words today.
I tell you what.
Here's a participation medal for doing interviews. You showed up to more interviews than Kamala and spoke for more time. We're going to give you all of the participation medals you want, buddy.
Let's talk about different standards, because I found it fascinating, Destiny, over the weekend, that out of nowhere, Dick Cheney, who was named Darth Cheney after Darth Vader by Democrats for 20 years, he was to them the evil personification, the villain figure of all conservative ills in America. The guy who took America into the illegal war in Iraq, who trampled over human rights left, right, and center. And yet suddenly he pops up because he doesn't like Donald Trump and says, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. And
because Donald Trump wants to be an authoritarian and he's openly threatening to kill and jail his political opponents.
Rather than renounce that endorsement with great speed, which is what she should have.
You know why? Because Cheney was on his knees crawling over to the Democrats. He said, you know what? I'm going to endorse this pro-trans, total LGBT community, pro-union. I'm going to support this pro-diversity, this pro-black party. I'm going to endorse this black woman who has the record of the most progressive senator. That's what Dick Cheney did. He crawled on his knees over here to try and defend democracy. It's not like everyone's just like bowing down to Dick Cheney. We're saying, hey, you know, you might be really, really evil, but you're not this evil. Or at least you can give him credit for not being stupid enough to try and overthrow the entire United States. Only Jill Stein can do that.
Have done if she had any principles. She issued a statement saying, I'm proud to receive Dick Cheney's endorsement. What happened to the 24 years of Dick Cheney's the most, according to Joe Biden in 2008, the most dangerous vice president in the history of the United States, is what he said about Dick Cheney. And here's his own vice president saying how proud she is to get that endorsement. Do you feel a sense of pride?
Endorsements are one way. He endorsed her. I mean, it represents some segment of the Republican Party that's obviously dissatisfied with trying to re-elect a traitor, an insurrectionist.
Would you be proud if Dick Cheney endorsed you?
For running for president, you take any endorsement you can get, of course.
Really?
Just because somebody endorses you, somebody endorses you doesn't mean that you support their beliefs.
You take any endorsement you can get. So if Adolf Hitler decides to offer an endorsement, you would accept it.
A vote is a vote. Just because somebody endorses you doesn't mean that you have to. What does it mean to reject an endorsement?
You would literally take an endorsement from Adolf Hitler to win power?
Well, right now I wouldn't because Hitler's dead. So I don't know what is the point? Do you have to go around and try to disavow different segments of voters that are voting for you? This is such a nonsense. This is such a
Listen, if the KKK supports you on the basis that you agree with their idea of separatism and you agree with white supremacy, that's not good. But if Dick Cheney endorses you because he's also against fascism, that's probably all right. So it does matter in some sense why they're endorsing you. But let's talk about, the word Hitler and the person Hitler. And yeah, a perfect David Duke transition. Very true. I wish Adolf Hitler was talked about in a real historical sense because everyone uses him as evil personified. And I'm not going to go down some twitter.com neo-Nazi stuff, but we don't ever talk about the actual features that made Hitler so bad, that allowed him to rise to power. I doubt any American would know, except people that watch that are far, not far left, but liberals. I doubt people would understand how what Donald Trump is doing right now is so similar to what Hitler did. And I doubt they would understand that Hitler speeches almost mirror one for one Donald Trump speeches he's giving now. And Donald Trump is going just as far as Hitler did. But no, we talk about Hitler like, oh, he's the ultimate villain. How dare you compare Donald Trump to him? And to be fair, we did cry. We were the boy who cried wolf for a while. But we finally have someone who does represent many of those values and tactics. So yeah, I wish
nonsense question.
It's actually a very good question. It's a very good question.
Absolutely not.
But I'm going to bring in a living figure. If Kim Jong-un decided to offer an endorsement to Kamala Harris, should she accept it or not?
When you say accept an endorsement, should she have a formal ceremony celebrating it?
If Kim Jong-un today said, I endorse from North Korea Kamala Harris to be president of the United States, would you think she should accept that?
Tell me what you mean when you say accept it. Should she tell him no,
should
don't
she
vote
issue
for
a
me?
statement
Or don't,
with Dick Cheney, she issued a statement saying how proud she was that he endorsed her. And that staggered me, given what a...
Okay, what did Kamala actually say? Let's find out Kamala's actual quote about Dick Cheney.
What a hate figure Cheney has been for 3 decades or more to liberals, progressive liberals. Here's one of the most progressive, if not the most progressive liberal Democrat nominee in American presidential history, saying how proud she is that Dick Cheney endorsed it. So my question to you was frivolous to start with. Would you accept Hitler's endorsement for a candidate? And you said, absolutely. We didn't dispute it. And then you said, but he's dead. So then I said, well, what about Kim Jong-un or President Xi or Vladimir Putin or the Ayatollah Khomeini? I mean, at what point do these endorsements, if you accept them proudly, become actually disgraceful slurs on your...
Okay, no, she literally just gave him the Liz Cheney treatment where you say, thank you for putting country above party. That's all they said. It wasn't like some grand endorsement, of course. And any reasonable person would not assume that Kamala would say, wow, I love Dick Cheney now. No, we're accepting Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala because we understand the greater threat that's happening right now. By the way, please drop a like on the stream if you're watching.
Your own integrity.
This is a nonsense question. And I remember back in 2008, I watched Ron Paul get hit with the same question. When I was a young college kid, I used to be a libertarian. I think it was some KKK organization or something that came out. They supported Ron Paul. And people were saying, Ron Paul, do you disavow the endorsement from the KKK leader? And Ron Paul said, you know what? If people want to vote for me, that's fine. I'm not going to tell people not to vote for me.
Terrible
Just because somebody endorses me doesn't mean that I support all the views of that person. You would agree with that, right?
No,
if somebody endorses you, it doesn't mean you...
I don't like this argument, dude. This is not a good argument about the KKK. That's a little bit too extreme of an example because they're not going to endorse you because they agree with you on, I don't know, the leasing requirements for fracking or whatever. The KKK is like one of the worst examples, and probably one of the only examples is a radical group like that where you cannot really accept an endorsement from them and have it look good.
Sorry, no, I would say, no, if the KKK want to endorse me, I will publicly denounce that endorsement and say I want nothing to do with it. That is called being a civilized human being. You appear, Destiny, correct me if I'm wrong, to be of the view that literally any endorsement that helps you win power is absolutely fine, even if they're genocidal maniacs.
I don't know if I would consider Dick Cheney to be a genocidal maniac.
He was literally
if somebody wants
called
to
that.
vote for you,
He's literally
if
was
somebody
called
wants
that
to
when they
vote
called
for
him
you,
Darth
if somebody
Cheney.
wants to vote for you, this is an absurd standard. If somebody wants to vote for you, then allow them to vote for you. If their fans want to vote for you, then allow them to vote for you. Why would you sit here and fight against an endorsement for a vote?
Well, okay, let me go to somebody who actually
Absolute
needs...
nonsense.
Okay, well, I don't agree with you. I think you've just discovered you've opened a can of worms and you can't work out a way to get out of it. Let me bring in Jill Stein.
Yeah, exactly. As long as Dick Cheney's not influencing Democratic Party politics and actual policy, in this scenario, it doesn't matter. But I wouldn't broadly say accept any endorsement. And I doubt Destiny would either.
I mean, Jill, if you got an endorsement...
Because you can say there are endorsements that would be beneficial to reject. But you can also, in another way, make an argument that if there's an endorsement you don't like, you'd probably just stay away from commenting on it in general, because you don't want to give any more interaction to that in general, because it'll become a bigger story. But yeah, it's hard to really, like, if, what's his name, like Richard Spencer endorses Joe Biden, you're not going to really talk about that, because you know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not in agreement with these viewpoints.
From Dick Cheney or the Ku Klux Klan or Vladimir Putin, a public endorsement, what would your reaction be?
I would publicly reject it, but let me say, I think more important than the endorsement is the fact that the policies of Dick Cheney, you know, his neocon approach to our foreign policy, his endless war machine, you know, his very hostile, you know, it's like fight first and ask questions later. I think that's the core of the problem right here, is that the Democrats have very much adopted the agenda of Dick Cheney and the Republican war machine. That is the more critical problem here than the endorsements. But yes, absolutely, I would certainly reject those endorsements.
I mean, we've got a picture.
But the real problem here is that the Democrats have really adopted the policies of the Republicans.
I want to show a picture. This is a view with the world lead.
Yeah, I agree. If you're looking at that perspective in a bubble or in a vacuum, but the ripple effect of accepting a KKK endorsement would obviously be negative.
Let's take a look. It's you sitting at a table with Vladimir Putin. So if Vladimir Putin offered you an endorsement, what would you say?
I would absolutely reject it. And I was there.
Yeah, true. You would say, I don't know why they're endorsing me. I don't really care. They're weird. Let's move on to issues that actually matter. That's probably what I would do. But that hypothetical that he gives just doesn't really land with me.
I would absolutely reject it. And I was there actually at a conference in order to challenge Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to talk with him because he sat at that table for about...
Okay, I know we're talking about Jill Stein and Putin right now. But, okay, did she just say I didn't even get a chance to really talk to them? That's wild. Okay, so you can't recycle weird for other people, though? I don't know. You don't need to say weird. I just literally meant you kind of disregard it. Like, it's stupid. I don't care. Let's talk about real issues. What does Dick Cheney get out of endorsing Kamala? Believe it or not, the stability of the entire world is at stake right now. So it's self-serving, regardless of your political position, to support Kamala Harris. Even if you're getting nothing from the admin in the traditional sense. If you want to live in a stable global world, global world is a crazy term, but if you want to live in a relatively stable society, then you are pro-Harris, if you have all the information.
Unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to talk with him because he sat at that table for about 10 minutes before he gave his speech in Russian. There were no introductions. There were no...
Yeah, that too. Sorry for pausing again, but that is true as well. Getting Trump out of the picture benefits everyone involved. Including Democrats, including Republicans. And Republicans feel that they can get their party back if Donald Trump loses.
About 10 minutes before he gave his speech in Russian, there were no introductions. There were...
But I will say, pausing yet again, that Republicans will not get the party back unless if they talk about the very extreme racism happening right now. This is the most open white supremacy I've seen in my lifetime by far, by like multiple magnitudes. So I'm not sure how they disconnect that from the party. And I don't know if the 30% of Americans that are being very, very extremely radicalized right now, I don't know how they are going to adjust to regular political life again. So it's going to be really interesting to see in the next 8 years how the two parties restructure and what different coalitions are formed.
no exchanges whatsoever, no conversations. The one person I could talk with was a former German foreign minister who is sitting to my right, Willy Wimmer. But otherwise, I was not able to talk to any of the dignitaries. The guy on my left, I thought was just Putin's bodyguard. It turned out he was like his press, his chief of press or something on that. But there were absolutely no introductions. And by the way, the Senate Intelligence Committee investigated in detail whether there were any connections between myself.
Wow, that's a flex that you were investigated in general. And also, it was a Russian state media, a Russian TV sponsored event, a celebration of like their 10-year, of some type of like 10-year anniversary that she was at. And she's giving examples like, oh, I didn't even really get a chance to talk to them. Why were you there? And the only other person from America that was there was Michael Flynn, who is a very known fascist who called for multiple coups of the U.S. government.
My campaign and the Russian government, et cetera, and gave me a full exoneration and thanked me.
Yeah, we never even got to small talk. I never even got to small talk with Putin. You know? The investigation that was done didn't find anything that was criminal, but, you know, I was there for funsies.
For my full cooperation.
Okay.
So unfortunately, that photo is used as part of the Democrats' arsenal of trying to silence their competitors.
She was there in her like official capacity as Democratic election spoiler.
Okay, well, you've given a response to that, but let me put a quote back to you, which you said in February 2024. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a provoked response to the bigger, more murderous and illegal game plan of U.S. empire. In 2014, the U.S. backed a coup in Ukraine led by far-right insurrectionists. It was a giant step towards the goal of adding Ukraine to NATO and putting hostile bases and nuclear-capable missiles right on Russia's border. That sounds like a fairly ringing endorsement of Putin's invasion.
Well, what you didn't include was the first part of that quote, which was actually a condemnation of Putin's invasion as likewise being murderous and illegal, which it was. But the point is that it was totally avoidable, and once it occurred, it was actually quite fixable, and unfortunately, the U.S. and the U.K. disrupted the peace accord, which was well underway, a peace treaty between Ukraine and Russia, and the U.S. came in and the UK came in and said, no way. So that is the problem. This has been ginned up for a long time.
But just to
it's a very
clarify,
unfortunate circumstance that...
Why is Piers grilling her all of a sudden? Because he wants ratings. I'm pretty sure he's independent. He's independent now, right? That's why he's doing this show. So he wants ratings, and this gives ratings. He's not really affected by any of this.
Puts us all at risk. This is like, think of this
Jill,
like the Cuban Missile Crisis
to ask you a question.
in reverse.
Just to clarify, though, when you say that the invasion was a provoked response to the bigger, more murderous game of the U.S. empire, do you stand by that statement?
Ah, yes. I like Destiny laughing here. I hope Destiny responds. Because she blames Ukraine, right? She blames NATO for what Russia's doing right now, I'm pretty sure, from what I read at least.
So it's important. Let's put the Ukraine war in context of
Well, do you stand by that
75
statement?
regime change operations of the U.S.? Absolutely. I would like to be able to explain that statement so it doesn't have to stand as a soundbite. But absolutely. I mean, the U.S. spends more on our military than the next 10 countries combined. We spend half of our congressional budget on these endless wars. And what's going on in Ukraine basically was just the latest in a whole series of absolutely catastrophic wars that are robbing the American people blind. We're spending half of our congressional budget. The average household, according to Jeffrey Sachs, who I know is a friend of yours as well, at the University of Columbia, it's $12,000 is the cost of the endless war machine to the average American household. Now, most Americans do not know what we are paying for this and what the risks are, because, as I was mentioning, this is the...
I really don't like the argument if you say we need to end this support somewhere. And I know she's saying wars, but she's in favor of a more isolationist United States. If you say, for example, if we end our support of Ukraine, we can use that money in the U.S., that's a false dichotomy. And I don't want to use that standard even for wars that I believe are not just, because then everyone will be against, and by everyone I mean American citizens. If you use that rhetoric, Americans will be against foreign aid for supporting Ukraine, and also the hundreds of countries that we do support with, I don't know if that's the actual number, but the countries we do support with foreign aid Once Americans start thinking like, oh, we need that money to be used here, then what's going to happen is all foreign aid is going to be cut by far-right individuals, and we are still going to get zero investment in American communities. These two things, these two arguments need to exist, independently of each other. You can't tie them together. We're not going to stop, supporting Ukraine and use that money for universal childcare. That's not how any of this works.
Cuban Missile Crisis
I know what
in
you're
reverse.
paying for.
And you may recall.
I know what you're paying for. You're paying to preserve.
You know what? I'm sorry?
I think you're paying to preserve freedom and democracy, which is, by the way, what America's position in the world was for many, many decades, and very successfully.
See, the radical response to what he just said about defending democracy, Jill Stein would be radical and say that none of what we do is defending democracy. And someone who is a honest liberal would probably say that some of the things we do not benefit that goal, but we should still be focusing on things we do in order to benefit that goal.
I want to bring in Javier here.
Well,
I mean, it's very
it's no
interesting,
longer
Javier.
succeeding. Shall we make
bring in
that
Javier.
clear?
We're getting into interesting moral mazes here. Destiny doesn't mind having endorsements from Adolf Hitler or Kim Jong-un. Jill, they're thinking that America somehow is more to blame, it seems, than Russia for the invasion of Ukraine and so on.
Dude, I would hate being on this show. You say like one thing and you're not allowed to talk for like 30 minutes. And then Pierre, he just says all of these things about you. Just all of this characterization of your points, and you can't even respond, and you just sit there on screen as he's like putting this to your face.
More to blame, it seems, than Russia for the invasion of Ukraine and so on. How are we getting...
Destiny supports Destiny supports the KKK, and Jill Stein supports Russia. It's just like not being able to respond to that would drive me crazy. That would drive me crazy.
To these weird moral places, why is there not just an agreed line between people of all sides that yes, we defend freedom and democracy where we see it attacked and imperiled, and yes, actually endorsements from genocidal maniacs are not to be accepted?
Because that would make too much sense, Piers. I mean, at this point, we've already seen that politics, both domestically and globally, it's all about division. It's all about getting us to point the finger at each other. And overall, it's just an L for all of society. I think you should not... When it comes to, I want to go back to when it comes to accepting that endorsement, you can also just remain silent as someone comes out and endorses you, because ultimately you do want those votes. But the way that the left has embraced Dick Cheney's endorsement is just hilarious to me, especially considering Joe Biden's on record saying that Dick Cheney was the most dangerous vice president of all time. And they spent 20 years calling him a war criminal and all these nefarious things. But then you have Bernie Sanders going out and saying how great of a thing it is that Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris. But again, it just goes to show that this election is very much the people versus the system. And Kamala Harris is the representation of this system, and Donald Trump is representing the people. But when it comes to just the moral standard of all these different foreign entities and all these different just allegations of who's a war criminal and who is not, we are not focusing on what we can do to actually make people have a better quality of life here in America. The number one thing that is missing from modern political discussions is actual policy, and actual policy would be relatively easy to compromise if we got rid of all the antics, but that wouldn't get ratings and that wouldn't get the attention that people...
JD Vance would 100% be worse than Cheney. I would not even... I'd bet money that he'd be worse than Cheney, depending on like what metric you graded on, but he would be far worse. He is 1 degree away, maybe less, from being an outright neo-Nazi in his politics.
People want onto other things so that they can distract us, so that they don't have to do the actual work that it would take to solve our country and turn things around.
Okay, let me bring in Emily. I mean, Emily, do you think, political endorsements, that right...
The only way he wouldn't be worse, well, I don't know, because he wouldn't be worse on purpose because he's not good enough at what he does. Cheney was really good at what he does. He was really good at being calculated and bad. But if you look at Vance, the disruption that would come would be from like a race war in America. It would be from like militias that he encourages to go in the streets and disrupt our communities. It'd be from a fragmentation of our democratic process. It'd be from global destabilization. So like JD Vance's effects will be less, exact and less calculated directly. But yeah, I think JD Vance's outcomes would be worse, even if it's on accident.
Right now, they can be very valuable or not, as the case may be. I'm really not convinced that Dick Cheney's endorsement of Kamala Harris will be anything but in the slightly longer term bad for her. Certainly terrible for him and his reputation, and his daughter, who was a great Republican cheerleader and then decided to go full on against Trump. It cost her her seat, obviously. And they're the pair of them now queuing up to support a Democrat nominee, and she's proudly accepting them. After 25 years of vilifying this guy as the worst of the worst.
I mean, she flip-flops on a lot of things, so I'm not surprised by this. It's also the news cycle now. Let's be real. People are going to forget about this when she does the next dumb thing in a couple days. And, you know, the next speech comes out where in 18 minutes she can't even make one coherent sentence. But I do find it interesting. Very viral clips have been going online the past 24 hours I've been seeing of interview with Putin where he's smirking, almost laughing, saying that she should be the next president and she should win. He's basically endorsing her in this video, which I think is insane, but weirdly the media is suppressing that story right now, so I find that interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
Bro,
look,
if someone sees that video and comes away thinking like, yeah, Putin really wants Kamala to win, you need to really have a talk with that person, or just assume they can't read body language or the situation of anything at all if you think Putin is really endorsing Kamala out of that video. And of course the policy repercussion of Kamala wanting to support Ukraine, Trump wanting to let Russia do whatever they want. And by the way, it's really funny because Putin wanted to do that as a joke and to be in the news, but Trump got upset that Putin even joked about it, and Trump claimed the Putin endorsement back at his next speaking event. He said, nah, Putin was kidding. Even Trump said Putin was kidding, and that Trump really supports, or that Putin really supports Trump. So even, it's funny that Trump couldn't even like just let that stand.
Reason why Vladimir Putin's endorsing Kamala Harris is he wants her to be president. The only reason he wants her to be president, he thinks that she will be a weaker president of the United States than Donald Trump. Because Trump, for all the attempts to try and frame him as Putin's great buddy and so on and so on, he's unpredictable. And I think on the world stage, I quite like that unpredictability. It seemed to keep them all in their boxes, whether it was Kim Jong-un, President Xi, Putin, Ayatollah Khomeini. They all kept in their boxes pretty much for the 4 years.
They literally... What are we talking about? Iran literally attacked Saudi Arabia under Trump.
We weren't in war.
Kim Jong-un literally, that's great that you have a cute little phrase of in war, but they were attacking the country with bombs, okay? I don't know what you would call that. Whatever you would call that is fine. That's that's congratulations, okay? Kim was still testing missiles, okay? That didn't stop under Donald Trump. The appeasements that he was making around the world towards people wasn't moving us towards peace. It was moving us towards this false sense of security because Trump was too stupid or too lazy to actually deal with any of the issues that were going on around the world. This idea that he somehow gets credit for foreign policy because he kicked the can down the road on everything, that he invited the Taliban to Doha to make an agreement cutting out the Afghanistan government, that he abandoned allies in Syria while also bombing a Syrian airport. We say, oh, Trump was the president of peace when he was making deals in the Middle East, cutting out the Palestinians, when he was having photo ops with people like Kim. This idea that Trump was some great master of foreign policy is hilarious. Also, this idea that we should be talking policy in the United States instead of antics, I agree 1,000,000,000%. It's actually a huge problem that I have. Kamala Harris is significantly to the left of me on a lot of economic issues. We can't talk about that because the conservatives have abandoned policy since 2016. They just want to talk about whatever crazy antics Trump is up to. And the idea of making fun of Kamala Harris being unable to string together like a coherent sentence when Donald Trump gave a 3-minute rambling answer to what policy would you support to help children and to help childcare for struggling families is hilarious. Donald Trump literally can't speak. He has never put together a coherent policy thought.
That's why he does 3-hour-long interviews every day with the biggest people in the country.
3-hour-long interviews just being like, yeah, terrible liberals, suck liberals, I hate liberals, Biden, Kamala sucks, evil communist, on repeat. Those participation medals, I'm telling you.
Because he can't talk. Got it.
You should try actually watching one and listening to the words that he's saying instead of getting so excited that Donald Trump is speaking.
I watch every single one.
Interview he's done. Really, give me one coherent policy position that Trump has expanded on in the last 2 months.
So out of Theo Vaughn, Lex Friedman, Elon Musk, he didn't have...
No way she responded with Theo Vaughn. So out of Theo Vaughn and Lex Friedman, that's her response to that question, dude? That's the response.
Really, give me one coherent policy position that Trump has expanded on in the last 2 months.
So out of
Theo
Theo
Vaughn.
Vaughn,
That's
let's
it.
frame
Yeah,
this.
that's it.
Elon
Exactly.
Musk,
Thank
he
you.
didn't have one
policy
sentence
position
in 9
on
hours.
all of the critical issues that the American people are
Wait,
demanding.
why don't you say one of them? Say one of the sentences he had. Say one of the sentences. What was it when he, when Donald Trump did talk very well, is when he said, "Hey Elon, good job firing those striking workers." And when he says we're gonna, destroy and get rid of the Department of Education, he speaks great when he says that. That's such a wild response. Theo Vaughn, dude.
He didn't have one
position
sentence in 9 hours.
on all of the critical issues that the American people.
That's how you know. That's how you know. Someone like this lost an argument is when they just stop talking and say, "Got it," right after. When they say "got it," yeah, that's when you know you won the argument.
Are demanding. If you go to Kamala Harris's website, what do you find? You find advertisements for basically brand clothing and mugs, coffee mugs, and so on. You will not find her policies. And likewise, in their public statements and in their debates, we are not seeing coherent policies, and they're not being debated. Why? Because they're both being funded by the billionaires, by the oligarchs, by the upper 1%, and you have the parties enforcing that. If you saw the footage from the DNC, from the floor of the DNC, you saw the ring of corporate suites up at the top costing anywhere from $500,000 to $5 million. That is the power in the House, both for the Democrats and the Republicans. That is why we badly need to open up this political process, and that is what the American people are demanding. It's the American people who are locked out of this discussion in locking out other candidates who are not bought and paid for.
Okay, I want to just bring in another guest to just have a quick chat with me, and I'll get the reaction from the panel. A judge has ordered Donald Trump to stop using the song "Hold On, I'm Coming" after the family of one of the co-writers pursued a lawsuit. Trump's campaign used it at the RNC in July, as well as before and after speeches at various rallies.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless you.
Okay, why would I care about this person?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let me bring back the panel here. So, Destiny, let me start with you. I want to play a clip. This is Elton John during an interview with Variety, where he was asked about Donald Trump calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man. Let's take a look.
I know that you're not a supporter of Donald Trump's. He loves your music. How did it feel when he took the lyrics to Rocket Man and he used it as a nickname for Kim Jong-un, and then he gave Kim Jong-un...
I laughed. I thought it was brilliant. I just thought, good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah. Donald's always been a fan of mine, and he's been to my concerts many, many times. I'm always been friendly towards him, and I thank him for his support. Yeah, when he did that, I just thought it was hilarious. It made me laugh.
Now, I was very surprised by Elton John's words there. I was expecting him not to say that at all. But you got two very contrasting positions there, Destiny, from two musicians. One is the son of a great musician, one is the actual musician themselves.
Wow, very cool question. Yeah, I know about debate panels and stuff, but to be honest, I don't have all the time in the world, and I get paid like $0 for this. Not really zero. I think like $20 a month on Patreon. I don't really care about that, but this is a very expensive and time-consuming hobby to be doing this for 2 to 4 hours a day, including editing and including uploading. It's just a lot of it's a big time drain already. And I'm essentially just doing this because it's the election. I don't know if I'm gonna do this past the election. I could maybe do it until January. I don't know if I'm gonna go past January. We'd have to see, or I might pivot to doing videos that are more like, once a week, higher effort kind of things after that. I don't know.
It all revolves around Trump and
Dark
him
timeline
using their brands in some way
$25 a
to
month?
further his objectives. What's your view about this? Should it be tolerated, given that everyone does it? Should it?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate that you believe in me. I'll fight for my YouTube career just because of you. You could be the left-wing Shapiro.
Not be tolerated? Should people
Yeah,
like
I
Isaac
wanna
Hayes
be
III
dumb.
on behalf of his family have a legitimate case to sue for millions?
I mean, if copyright infringement is copyright infringement. I'll say that when I looked at those the two different situations that were presented here, though, it kind of looks like the big difference is who's endorsing who. So for Isaac Hayes, if the appearance is that his, the music that he, I think, is exercising control over, if that music is making it appear as though his family or his father is supporting or would have been supporting Donald Trump, that's the issue that he has with it. Whereas if Donald Trump is supporting a different musician, that musician is probably likely to just say like, oh, okay.
I don't want to talk. I mean, I feel like talking in a soothing way matters too. If you think about the greatest speakers who are really impactful and in the different ways they move their voice and the different cadence to really inspire the public, having more in your arsenal when it comes to rhetoric is extremely important. So your argument can really blah blah. If you want to talk fast, just to do what like Logic does and just like say the same word over and over again. When he's like, you ever hear Logic rap? He's like, I gotta get it, I know I gotta get it, no I gotta get it, no I gotta go and get it. When he just says like the same word like Trump does, then you can just like spam words over and over again. Talk so fast they can't hear your arguments. If they can't hear your arguments, how are they gonna respond?
That's cool that he supported me. Like, that's it. Because it's just an endorsement. It doesn't mean that you endorse all of their views, right? You endorsing somebody else is a much bigger deal than them endorsing you, is what I would say. That looked like the biggest difference there between those two situations.
All right, and Javier, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there will be lots of people at Trump rallies who probably are big fans of Isaac Hayes' music. I remember when I was at CNN and getting involved in lots of angry debates with NRA people about gun rights, that there were big stars
Kendrick
who would
in the Super
call
Bowl?
me and say,
I'm really
I don't want
surprised
to do that
Kendrick
interview
is.
with you next week, not because I don't like you.
I'm surprised
or
Kendrick's doing
don't
Super
like the
Bowl,
show, but
to be
because
honest.
I don't want to alienate half my audience, which struck me as a perfectly sensible position to have. Is it sensible for these artists or their families or their estate representatives to go to war with Trump, given that so many of the audiences may be actually people that like the music?
Well, I'm someone who also has ADHD who talks fast a lot, especially in real life. And you have to try to rein it in a lot. But if you're talking to people too fast, then they don't really understand what you're saying. They're not going to really get your points. They're going to think you're condescending. They're not going to follow everything. And sometimes you need to put it together for people like a puzzle, because then if you mumble too much and if you talk too fast, no one's going to be able to hear your arguments. So that's why Destiny cultivated an audience of mostly individuals that share the same, neurodivergencies, because they're able to comprehend everything and they will listen to every YouTube video on like 1.5 times speed, so much so that their dopamine sensors are messed up and they can't watch a video at the regular speed or they're going to become bored.
Well, in general, I think it's lame, tired, and played out. Just because your song is playing at a rally or at an event doesn't mean that the artist who made the song is endorsing the candidate that is playing the song. The candidate that's up on stage might just be a fan of the song. That does not mean that it works the other way around, especially respectfully considering that Isaac Hayes is deceased.
2.0 is crazy.
Nobody is sitting here thinking that, oh, his whole family must support Trump if he's using this song. However, I will give Isaac Hayes his family his credit. If it's true what he's saying about the copyright infringement, then yeah, pay him his money. I'm all for if that is the situation that's happening here. I'm sure it's not that big of an issue for the Trump campaign to pay him accordingly if that's the case here. But then you look at someone like Elton John. He's an example of someone, he is way too rich and way too established to be bought and paid for. He does not care about playing into the antics of, oh, I'm a celebrity. That means that I need to be far left and I need to be anti-Trump, because majority of celebrities either do not care or a lot of them have began to lean very conservative over the last.
I can't believe Elton John made like a 5-second long joke and now it's a huge media topic. It was a really playful joke too about the Rocket Man thing. You do real estate, so I had to adjust. Yeah, I need to make sure I look at myself when I'm talking, record myself to make sure I'm not going too fast, especially for public speaking. But it's easier if you're in the same room with someone, because if you're in front of a crowd, you can kind of, I'm probably autistic too, to be honest, and many of you are. And the reason you're here is because you are, most likely. So you probably interpret information in the same way. But you can use that to your advantage because you can see a lot of loopholes and opportunities. And you can formulate your messaging in a very calculated way that many people can't, because your brain moves so fast. It can be a superpower, just like Kanye said.
5 years, which you talk to a lot of them here in LA, but they're not public about it because they still have this idea that if they at all tiptoe in the waters of potentially voting Republican, then they're going to be canceled. But I really don't think that that's what should matter. I should not be hearing so much about whether or not Taylor Swift is a Republican. That should be the most irrelevant issue that is on the table. We should be focusing on the issues that are actually happening in our country, but instead we're looking at the celebrities and looking at them as if they're supposed to be the ones leading our country.
All right, Jill Stein, do you play music when you do campaign events and things?
No, usually I don't. I keep those universes entirely separate. They kind of occupy different parts of your brain. So I'm not an artist or a musician in the political world at all. And I have to say, I really respect, the right of artists to decide, how their work is going to be used. I think it's fine for it to be used if they want, and fine for them to say, no, this is very precious and deep, and I don't want it used by.
There's a lot of music that would fit the revolutionary aesthetic, so that's kind of surprising. There's a lot of music, especially hip hop and folk music, and there's tons of revolutionary themed music that would go with the Jill Stein campaign. So it's kind of wild that she doesn't. I don't know. Very interesting.
A candidate that really violates the values of the work of art.
My problem with all this.
Wait, so the using works of art from musicians violates that art if you tie it to a campaign? Is that what she just said?
Totally respect.
Yeah,
the
my problem, Emily, with all
here.
this is that you could go to a massive party, a nightclub with 5,000 people in it, and half of them might be MAGA supporters, and the DJ might play all sorts of songs.
No, there's no nightclub in America that's going to be half MAGA supporters. You're thinking of like American Legions. And you're thinking of dive bars, okay? That's where you're going to find half MAGA or, like, majority MAGA. They are, I don't know. It's tough out there, man. It's tough.
Right? What's the difference?
Respectfully, I completely disagree with everyone. I think it's a song. I think music is for everybody. I think it is absolutely silly to put any politics with any kind of music. It's music. It's for everybody. It's truly.
Oh, this hurts me. I'm offended by this, dude. I'm offended. These are the types of people that listen to Rage Against the Machine, and they think the machine they're raging against was just like the speaker or something. I don't know. Like they'll literally scream, "Those who burn crosses are the same in the." Wait, what's the? I forget the lyrics. I'm tired. You know what I'm talking about. Those who burn crosses are the same that are in forces or whatever.
That black and white. The first guy's statement is so hypocritical. He's like, it's not political, it's not personal. And then he goes on about how he doesn't like Donald Trump. I'm like, so this is clearly very personal. And of course, now you want money out of it. I get if, you violate something, you should pay. But it's so funny because I'm like, now of course it's personal. And the second one, do you notice how they have to start off? They're like, you're not endorsing Donald Trump and you're not a fan of him. And then he has nothing but nice things to say about him. I'm sorry. Frankly, it's very silly in general and it shouldn't matter at all.
Listen, Jill Stein, you're correct to say she's very forgettable and she doesn't really do anything. And I made differentiations in every video I had so far about this topic where I think there can be useful coalitions and third parties and coalitions within the two-party system. But a big issue is that she doesn't do anything outside of what she's currently doing. But I know many individuals who are in the mindset where they don't know if they want to vote for Trump or Harris because of the Israel-Palestine or the Israel-Hamas, whatever you want to label it as, conflict, because of moral reasons. So there are many people who share these views, but to be honest, in my experience, and this is isolated to my own experience, but in my experience, those who are saying that they are going to vote third party and not vote for Kamala or Trump are typically from privileged environments and they've gotten very good educations. So I do not know many working class people, people of color in general, who would say, I'm just going to vote for third party because of this one issue. Especially when Kamala is far better than Trump, obviously, on this. But it's usually from privileged backgrounds that I see people being willing to just like say, yeah, I'm voting Green Party in Pennsylvania, for example.
Sort of agree. I just think music's for all. And also, you're right.
Music is for everyone.
Yeah, and Isaac Hayes III there, I did think he started from a position of it's about copyright, and he ended up making it pretty clear it's because he can't stand Donald Trump. Which is
he went from logical to emotional, and it was hypocritical.
I'm afraid I kind of agree with you.
She knows all the words: logical, emotional, hypocritical, political, cynical, literal.
Been afraid of it, actually. I think it is a hypocrisy. I want to turn just...
She's like proud that she nailed the rhyme scheme right there, dude.
Yeah, and Isaac Hayes III there, I did... and also, you're right.
Music is for everyone.
Yeah, and Isaac Hayes III there, I did think he started from a position of it's about copyright, and he ended up making it pretty...
This is literal, hypocritical, political, literal, literature. That's like one of those really deep rhymes, dude. It's the revolution, the stop pollution, the restitution, for less abuse, and a lot of other good things.
Because he can't stand Donald Trump. Which is
he went from logical to emotional, and it was hypocritical.
I'm afraid I kind of agree with you. I'm not even afraid of it, actually. I think it is a hypocrisy. I want to turn just quickly to...
And I just want to add that a political use of a work of art is not indifferent. It's not abstract. It's not economically indifferent. You know, it's a very economically charged use of a work of art. So I think it's entirely within the right of the artist to say, you're not going to exploit my work for something that really deeply offends my values or my copyright. You know,
it is, but
politics is not like some neutral thing. Politics is very
but
owned
Jill, the
by
point
the
is,
upper
I think the
1%.
point Emily's making that I agree with is just be open about it. Just say, no, we cannot stand Donald Trump. He makes us puke. We're not going to let him use my dad's songs. I can respect that. It's when you try and pretend it's about copyright and stuff, but actually, as the interview progresses,
it can be both, buddy. You can do two things at once.
we don't want to make this political. Well, actually, you do, because you can't stand him, and you don't want him using your.
Well, here's the real question for Emily and Piers. Let's say that you and your friends recorded songs as part of your band, and Hitler wanted to use those songs during one of his presentations. Would you be happy with that?
I would ban him immediately.
Well, then there you go. Then apparently you agree that artists should have control over who plays their music.
That brings the moral maze full circle. I want to quickly talk about another moral maze.
No, I think he wants the check.
Yeah, I think he wants both, actually.
Yeah, I think he just wants money, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I suspect that's the case.
I can't blame
I think
him.
it's
I take
Donald
the check
Trump
too.
who wants the check, and Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
It's the
I mean, look,
politicians who want
personally,
the checks,
I would
you know,
really
and it's
miss...
the politicians
This is like an SNL parody, dude. The way they're all chiming in.
who are getting the big checks.
I
Let's
would
be clear
really
about
miss the
that.
Trump dancing. He's just got it right off to a T to that song. So personally, I love those gifs with Trump. The Justice Department is alleging that some of the biggest stars in right-wing social media were unwittingly, they say, part of a sinister Russian operation to influence the 2024 US election. They weren't directly named personalities or accused of any wrongdoing, but court documents unsealed on Wednesday revealed that Russian state media producers funneled nearly $10 million to an unnamed Tennessee-based online media company. The company identified by CNN later as Tenet Media boasts talent including Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Lauren Southern, Taylor Hanson, Matt Christensen, and Dave Rubin, many of whom have been on this show quite regularly.
You know, it's really interesting that the fall person for this entire thing ended up being probably the least relevant and least skilled of them all. It's really interesting that Lauren Chen is the person that's now off of YouTube and off of all the websites when there's far more much more damaging people involved. So I wonder if that was somewhat intentional, using her as the access point. Because I think everyone would agree she's the least convincing, she's the least consequential of everyone named.
2 Russian state media employees charged with a conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act and money laundering. Quite a serious story, this, clearly. Destiny, you've been pretty outspoken.
Some of the small creators.
You said about Tim Pool on X, unbelievable. You're either maliciously working against the US or so effing stupid you couldn't discern Russian propaganda talking points from what's actually true and factual news. If nothing else, the credibility of everyone around you should be destroyed as a result of this. And you also posted on X to Benny Johnson, suggesting otherwise. You knowingly spread disinformation and bullshit on the internet, aligning with Russian interests, and you absolutely should have effing known better if you were getting paid massive amounts of money to do it. Your lawyers can email me. Well, first of all, have their lawyers emailed you yet?
No, nobody actually sues for defamation in the YouTube world. It's just a thing that people say because they have no idea what the actual malice standard is, and they have no idea what anything entailing a lawsuit is. My biggest issue with this is,
I think I'm gonna start a trend where I just like, if I get into an argument with anyone, you just say you're gonna contact your lawyers, or you'll be like, you know, my lawyers will be in contact with you soon, even in public. Just like randomly.
I do believe
my attorneys will be at your doorstep.
I do believe, assuming everything that on the indictment is true, that the 6 commentators weren't told explicitly that they were being hired by what was ostensibly an arm of the Russian propaganda machine. But at the very least, Dave, Rubin, and Tim were getting offered such exorbitant amounts of money that for you to not even stop and ask the question when you purport to be a journalist, or like in Tim Fool's case, an investigative journalist, and you don't even stop and you're like, $500,000 a month for a show that's barely doing any views from a political organization. Sure, why not? That's wild to me.
And then when you don't like sue them, just like Donald Trump's doing, Hillary's so lucky I never did anything. I could put Hillary in prison. Then you could just be like, you're lucky I didn't sue you. I was about to. I got all my lawyers together in the same room. We had an amazing case. We're going to put you in prison. We're going to sue you for everything you've ever earned in your entire life. We're going to put you in debt because you had to pay me back for this. But you're lucky that I chose grace and I chose forgiveness, because I was about to ruin your life, buddy.
Yeah, is it
don't make me
problematic,
contact my
this or not?
manager.
Can you say that one more time?
Is it problematic to you what's happened here?
I mean, of course it is. I'm not a fan of Russia having any involvement in our politics. I don't believe that many of these commentators necessarily knew exactly where the money was coming from, but I don't know. I don't want to speak on anyone's behalf because I'm not too familiar. But I think it just goes into the greater issue that's here. I don't like that Russia is getting so involved with our politics, and I don't like all the influence that China has had on our politics and on our country in general. I think it's ironic that the news broke about this whole Russia scandal less than 24 hours after there was a Democrat official who had just gotten exposed for being connected with the CCP as well. I think this speaks to a greater issue that whether you're Democrat or Republican, we should all be very unhappy with the foreign influence that's coming to our media and spreading propaganda here. But we'll see how this plays out as more information comes to the surface.
I mean, I should make it clear.
Oh, you have not seen pivots yet, Andrew. You're going to see Trump tomorrow. They're going to ask him about childcare and education. And he's going to be like, well, childcare is childcare, of course. And childcare is very important to care for childs. And also, the border. There are immigrants filling up the classrooms that don't even speak English. And that's why education is bad. So we need to eliminate the Department of Education and take all that funding and put it in the border. That's what Trump's going to do for everything. The healthcare system, it's the border. The border is, corrupting and overfilling the healthcare system. It's overwhelming the healthcare system. If you think about Roe v. Wade, I don't know how that would tie. I don't have a hypothetical for that one, but you know what I mean. No, actually, Roe v. Wade, he's just like, yeah, I'm amazing. Actually, that thing that no one wanted, Roe v. Wade, I got it done, all right, buddy? No one else could get it done. I'm the one that got it done. Roe v. Wade, that's me. Don't give credit to anyone else, buddy. Roe v. Wade's me. Putin wants me to win, all right?
All the ones who've gone public about this, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool and others, they've all vehemently denied having any knowledge about where this money was actually coming from. Emily, do people have to be more careful?
Sorry, I'm just coming from common sense here. I work in right-wing media. It's pretty tough. No one's throwing money like that my way, I'll tell you that. But I think it seems a little suspicious in common sense. There's so few money in right-wing media because it's hard to tell the truth because you get censored.
There's so few money? There's so few money. She keeps doing it.
There's so few money in right-wing media because it's hard to tell the truth because you get censored and taken off everything. So maybe that's why they were so thirsty. If they were innocent, that sucks. But if they knew, whatever happens to them, according to law, may be it. I'm not on any of their sides. I'm not personally friends with any of them, and I don't know what's going on. I just want everything to be fair as it, that's it.
Jill Stein is Vladimir's best friend on this panel.
Is Trump going to talk tomorrow during the debate and say that kids are getting gender transition surgeries in school? Is Trump going to say that? Can Trump control himself? Is he going to repeat that? Is Trump going to talk about how there's, immigrants going and stealing pets and eating pets in Ohio? that completely fabricated story. Is Trump gonna just like, is he just gonna do it tomorrow? Is Trump gonna like shock all of us? Is Trump gonna like invent new slurs for Kamala? Like, I want to know how far Trump is gonna go tomorrow. It's gonna be wild. But yeah, who knows? I don't know if there's an audience or not. I really don't know. I hope there's not, and I'm pretty sure there's not because that's how the first rules were. And the idea was that this debate would have the same rules as the first one, but I'm not sure. It is in Philadelphia, though.
A joke. What do you make of this?
Well, you know, I think in terms of being fair all around, it's important to put this in context. As Destiny said, there's a handful of views here. So this is not the big impact. On the other hand, let's look at AIPAC, you know, which ought to be treated and considered a foreign agent, which has...
AIPAC is registered in the U.S. as a lobbying group and is actually based in D.C., I think. Dark influence from foreign governments working in shell companies is not the same as AIPAC or any other organization. You cannot equate these things, even if you don't like AIPAC.
Has spent $100 million, I think, so far in this election, which has enormous impact on who goes to Congress and who doesn't, and who's removed, and then what policies actually. You know, there was Netanyahu accused as an absolute war criminal by the International Criminal Court, being applauded with a standing ovation once every minute by a Congress which is completely out of step here with the American people. And you've got AIPAC, which is a very powerful force behind this. So, you know, I think that's where we need to be looking. You know, RFK, the original.
No, yeah, Trump's gonna say, you know, DEI. Kamala was DEI. Look at this. Trump's gonna say this sentence, this DEI next to me, you know, because you know what they actually mean. Obviously, we all know what they mean when they say DEI hire. Oh, you're the DEI president from the DEI party, and you must have a lot of DEI friends. So Trump's definitely gonna say all of that stuff, but we need Trump to do something wild to really tank his chances. And then the crazy part is, I think Trump can say anything. He might go to 45% in the polls, but I don't know where Trump's true floor is at. We're going to find out, though, where Trump's floor is. I'm confident that Harris is prepared. I'm hoping that we're able to lead him. You know what Trump's going to say. It's like a pre-programmed NPC in a video game. If you give it the right responses, you know that you can lead it down the right dialogue tree. Kamala needs to memorize the Trump dialogue tree and trap him. It should not be that hard. But again, many people do like propaganda, so it is going to be harder than it seems.
Completely out of step here with the American people. And you've got AIPAC, which is a very...
Yeah, true. I bet you live in the DEI part of town.
Powerful force behind this. So, you know, I think that's where we need to be looking. You know, RFK, the original RFK, not RFK Jr., but the original RFK as an attorney general, and JFK.
Oh, wait, another comment too. I know there's that fake story about Haitian immigrants eating pets and whatever. That's completely fake. But in countries where, you know, it's really hard to survive in general, eating birds, they hunt ducks in America. Like, it's been a thing for a while to hunt birds and ducks and pheasants or pheasants. No, hunting peasants is what fascists do. But they're coming out with this story and calling immigrants savages. And we literally have a story of RFK just for funsies dragging that dead baby bear into Central Park or whatever. And none of the, I know we all know this, but none of the reaction to that was like, come on, guys. Stop making it so obvious. And supporters of these politicians, stop supporting the obvious lies. Like, come on, please. I understand you're in a different media bubble, but please break out of it. I'm begging you.
We're both in the process of reclassifying AIPAC as a foreign agent, which it should be.
Okay, well, just to be clear, none of you are
getting... And it has enormous impact, unlike a handful of views here.
Okay, she did not endorse Trump. That's one I made a video about that. That's my last video. She did not endorse Trump. She liked a comment that said, essentially, we need to stop Democrats and we need to vote Green or Trump. So she liked a comment saying support Green or Trump. We need to do anything to get Kamala out, to get Democrats out of office. And she's been endorsing things like that for a while now. It's really light. There's not tons of evidence that she's pro-Trump. She's not saying she's pro-Trump. But essentially, through her actions and through her media accounts, it looks like she's just trying to make Democrats lose more than anything.
Well, hold on.
I think it's really
real
important
quick.
to be looking at what
I don't know
counts
if
here.
I don't know if these are the new Russian marching orders that went out to all of the propaganda people that work for them, I guess international media. I hear this line a lot, the big impact line. That's not relevant. First of all, people say, well, it didn't have that big of an impact. That's not true. If you're receiving money and you might think that that money is tainted because it's coming from a certain source, you're not only going to change your views on that platform, you might change your views on your own platform. The work that Tim Pool was doing for Tenet Media wasn't getting very many views, but his main channel is probably one of the most popular right-wing podcasts in the United States. He probably does more views than most other political commentators online, save for a very small handful. So the idea that he might be changing that content so that he continues to milk those fat $500,000
yeah, but to be clear, there's no evidence any of them. Yeah, but there's no evidence any of them changed.
We can say there's no evidence, but I'm just saying that idea. Oh, well, it's just a small impact. This is just one company that was called out. I think the DOJ said there were some 600 foreign influencers that could be taking money from Russian sources right now. So I don't think it's fair to just wipe it off saying it's a small impact. Number one. Number two, AIPAC, okay, has Israel in the name. The issue with this funding wasn't that Russia was funding media. It's that there was no disclosure. They lied about it. That's the big issue.
Okay.
AIPAC is not undisclosing money. We don't know who they,
No,
like, oh
I
my
think
God,
it also
AIPAC
is a
supports
violation
Israel.
of
That's
US
insane.
law.
That's
no,
crazy.
They are violating.
Yes, the violation of the U.S. laws, FARA, yes, which is
that we're
disclosure
talking
for
about
international
is
funds.
actually a violation of FARA.
Okay,
Yeah.
listen, I've got to leave it
Well,
there.
It has to do with disclosure, which is about disclosure.
But that is
declaring
illegal.
to the State
That
Department
is
you're taking,
illegal. Not to
because they're not disclosing it.
To exercise influence on behalf of a foreign government is actually illegal without having declared it. So there are real legal consequences here. Yes, there absolutely are. And you can debate whether it's a tiny wave or a slightly larger blip. But the point is that AIPAC has a huge impact here and ought to be treated fairly and equally.
The sun has a bigger impact on our climate than our
agent.
cars do. That's not a point to anything. It doesn't mean anything. AIPAC and foreign money coming in through shell companies isn't even in the same conversation.
All right.
And also, when you talk about Russia, the Russian Gate thing being weird and being surprised to have this story shared, just consider, too, that America was funding, I'm pretty sure we were funding misinformation campaigns on COVID vaccines. I saw that story a few months ago. We were trying to share ads to get other countries to not like vaccines. And I'm sure other countries do that to the U.S. as well. And we're getting proof of that here, obviously, but the U.S. is on record of doing that very recently with COVID in specific.
I've got to leave it there.
Well, I think it is to a lot of American people who are watching our foreign policy really
Well, you
go
both
off
made
the
your
cliff right now.
you both made your points there.
Israel has
I've got to leave it there.
enormous
Thank you to my panel. To be clear, none of you are being paid $500,000 to appear on this. Not even me. And the Russians have got nothing to do with it, as far as I'm aware. So none of you have changed your opinions today because you're being paid to by the Russians. So on that basis, it's an extremely useful exercise for the last hour from our panel. Thank you all very much indeed for joining me.
All right. It's over. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I was very enlightened, and I'm now voting fourth party. I'm voting fourth party. I'm actually voting for every party in the election. I already have it established that I will be voting multiple times. Multiple social security numbers, and this is voter fraud, a clear case of voter fraud.